Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths canon never walked. The choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The wizarding world operates under a quieter, but no less lethal, delusion in this timeline, that Hogwarts is a whimsical maze which reveals itself to all children equally, given time and courage. They are wrong. The corridor is empty. War has driven most of the living behind warded doors, but Harry walks alone beneath the high watching arches, 20, tired, and moving with a methodical certainty that looks like bravery from a distance and feels like exhaustion from the inside. To Ron, if Ron were here, these stones would be bare. To Hermione, only dust and torchlight. To Harry, the castle is screaming. Spectral layers peel away from the walls as he passes, like veils tugged by an invisible hand. Ghostly replays of first years from decades ago hurry through one another, laughing in sepia tones. A prefect from the 1940s slaps a younger boy. The echo of the blow trembles in the stone. Above them, runes smoulder in the mortar, ancient, serpentine sigils marking where the founders braided bloodwoods into the foundations. In the shadow of a suit of armor, a smear of oily darkness clings to the floor, pulsing faintly, the residue of a Horcrux hidden here once, long before anyone spoke the word aloud. Harry does not need a wand to see any of it. He never did. The world believes his power lies in the scar, in the prophecy, in the jewel that turned a cottage into a shrine, and a baby into a banner. They are wrong again. His real power has always been this. Hogwarts itself chose him as its eyes, and no one else ever knew. In this Slytherin timeline of perception, the castle is not a backdrop. It is a semi-sentient fortress with preferences, grudges, and a long memory for spilled blood. Its staircases do not move randomly. They redirect the unwary away from sealed crimes or toward them when a particular soul resonance brushes their banisters. Its rooms do not merely answer need, they negotiate it, weighing desire against danger. And for reasons no headmaster has ever uncovered, all of that intent, all of that dark architectural awareness opens like a book for one boy who never asked to read it. This reframes everything. The trail to the Philosopher's Stone was not luck and childish curiosity. Harry could see the castle's layered defences like a glowing thread through the floors, each enchantment burning in his vision as a different colour, from the troll's brutish haze to the mirror's cold, silver geometry. The basilisk was never just a voice in the pipes. Its passage left hairline fractures of venom and fear in the brick, a tactically lethal spore only he could follow. The room of requirement was not discovered by accident. To him, it pulsed behind the wall, like a hidden heartbeat, a chamber that watched back. Later, as Horcruxes proliferate, he will see stains before Dumbledore suspects, before Voldemort understands he has been exposed. Shadows that cling too long. Candles that gutter in patterns matching a murdered heartbeat. The war becomes a cartography of corruption only one pair of eyes can read. So the question is not whether Hogwarts has secrets. It always has. The question is what you do when you are the only witness to a school's buried crimes and living memories. Do you expose them to a world that treats children as symbols? Do you weaponize them in the name of victory? Or do you protect them, even from your friends? Because some truths, once spoken, cannot be put back into the walls. Harry Potter, a weapon being polished in the dark by a castle that may love him, may fear him, and may simply be using him, walks on, and with every step, Hogwarts shows him more. Halloween 1981. When a castle chose a child. Halloween 1981 is remembered as the night a baby defeated a Dark Lord. They are wrong. In this timeline, that night is when a castle quietly chose a child, and the war for the soul of Hogwarts began decades before anyone named it as such. The canonical story stops at the cottage in Godric's Hollow. Lily's scream, green light, a failed murder curse rebounding upon its master. But magic does not end at the walls of a nursery. When Voldemort's killing curse collapses in on itself, it does more than shred his body. It detonates along Britain's ley lines, racing beneath fields and rivers with methodical certainty, a pressure wave of unmoored intent, hunting for anchors. That wave slams into the bedrock under the Scottish Highlands and collides with the foundations of Hogwarts, a fortress of layered oaths and sentient stone. For a heartbeat, the castle wakes up. Rowling hints at this sentience in canon. The shifting staircases, the marauder's map, the room of requirement that seems to read desire. But in this timeline, those are not quirks. They are symptoms. Deep beneath the dungeons, where Salazar Slytherin once carved his secrets into the bones of the earth, the ancient wards shudder as the curse impact resonates through them, like a bell struck too hard. The protections that have watched generations of children pass under their gaze feel something tear, feel a soul fragment ripped loose and flung, and they reach. The link is technical, almost clinical. Voldemort's soul fragment, hurled from the wreckage of his body, seeks the nearest vessel, a crying infant, with Lily's sacrificial protection still burning around him. Yet that fragment is not clean. It has been braided for years with Hogwarts' oldest magics, wards Tom Riddle studied, prodded, and parasitized as a student, threading his Horcrux rituals through the castle's existing architecture. When the fragment latches onto Harry, it drags those threads with it. A three-way soul resonance forms in an instant. Dark Lord, child, and castle locked into a single forbidden circuit. The response is immediate. In the Headmaster's office, silver instruments whirl and shriek, spitting sparks in colours no human eye can name. One delicate device, tuned to track external tampering with the wards, simply explodes into silence. In the dungeons, condensation blooms on the stones, as if the rock itself is sweating under invisible strain. In the Great Hall, every floating candle gutters and flares sickly green for a single breath before writing, leaving only a faint smell of ozone and grave dirt. Most assume it is a draft. They are wrong again. It is the castle noticing that a piece of its own defensive lattice has been embedded in a newborn mind. Harry Potter is not merely the boy who lived. He becomes, in that moment, an unintended instrument. His scar is less a wound and more an interface, a masterpiece to be molded by pressures no one understands, forged from the collision of murder curse, Horcrux, and sentient architecture. What the world will later call visions and odd feelings are, in truth, the first flickers of a perception engine, tactically lethal if ever directed with purpose. On Privet Drive, baby Harry sleeps in a too small cupboard, the mundane silence of suburbia pressing in. His scar glows faintly under its crusted blood, pulsing once, twice, like an answering heartbeat. Miles away, the stones of Hogwarts thrum in perfect synchrony, a single wave rippling through tower and tunnel, as if the castle is listening to that fragile rhythm, and quietly claiming him as its chosen witness. The war has not begun yet, but the castle has already picked its spy, growing up haunted, a childhood of invisible shadows. The war has not begun yet, but Privet Drive becomes its first haunted trench. By the time Harry can stand in his cot and grip the rails, the air around him is already misaligned. He will stare, for long, unblinking minutes, at a blank patch of nursery wall where no one else sees anything. He, however, watches the faint ghost of a stone archway shimmer in and out, torches guttering along a corridor that does not exist in Surrey. When Petunia snaps, "Stop that," and turns the light on, the vision thins but does not vanish. Light does not banish this dark. It only reveals how alone he is in it. As language arrives, so do the sounds. At night, when the house sinks into its heavy suburban silence, Harry hears other footsteps layered beneath Vernon's snores, the soft echo of shoes on flagstones, the distant drag of chains, the low rise and fall of Latin that his mind cannot translate but instinctively files as authority, as lesson, as war counsel. He dreams of turning corners he has never walked, knowing without doubt that 3 steps after the next bend, there will be a door with a lion carved into the hinge. In this timeline, his first map of the world is not Little Whinging. It is a phantom floor plan of Hogwarts, etched behind his eyes. The Dursleys do not see a gifted child. They are wrong. They see a boy who flinches from empty corners, who angles his body to avoid invisible figures crossing the kitchen, who murmurs, "Sorry," to vacant doorways when a procession of robed shades passes through him. Petunia's old fear of her sister's magic calcifies into disgust. The way Harry's gaze slides past her to some point just over her shoulder makes her feel as if she is the ghost. Vernon, affronted that his fortress of normality might contain a crack, responds with methodical certainty. He beats the imaginary friends out of Harry, or believes he does. The real lesson Harry absorbs is simpler. Silence is safer than explanation. His sight, at this stage, obeys rules he cannot yet articulate. It spikes with emotion. Fear sharpens the arches, anger brightens the torches, and it flares near magic like iron near a magnet. When the first thick parchment envelope arrives, the Hogwarts crest pressed into green wax, the hallway of Privet Drive buckles. For a heartbeat, the wallpaper peels back, and he is standing in a stone corridor that smells of wax and dust, soul resonance humming through his scar as if the castle is tugging on a shared nerve. On a primary school trip to a Muggle museum housed in old stone, the overlay becomes total. The echoing gallery dissolves into the great hall, banners unfurling above bewildered chaperones, candles hovering where fluorescent lights should be. He walks through 2 realities at once, cataloguing both with a detached, almost clinical precision. In this enforced interior exile, Harry begins to treat the visions like weather. They arrive without permission, but with patterns. They can be endured if properly compartmentalized. He learns to split his mind, one part tracking Dudley's fist, the other noting that a spectral staircase to his left has just rotated with slow, tectonic grace. The Slytherin timeline will later name this discipline occlumency, but here it is, simply survival. Walls, built inside a child's skull, a masterpiece to be molded by necessity rather than mentor. The first open acknowledgement from the other side comes on his 11th birthday, as the clock in the lounge grinds toward midnight. Another day of Vernon's rants and Petunia's thin-lipped avoidance behind him. Harry lies awake in the cupboard, counting the breaths between creaks. When the final chime lands, the vision that hits is not a corridor, not a fragment. It is altitude. He is suddenly above the castle he has only ever seen in slices. Towers spearing the sky, the black lake a sheet of ink, the forbidden forest a ragged bruise around the stone. The perspective is wrong for a child's dream. It feels like being pulled into the castle's own point of view, as if its wards have opened a lidless eye. For the first time, the gaze is mutual. The battlements glow along their edges, lines of power tracing like veins, and the entire structure seems to inhale. Harry has the irrational, tactically lethal certainty that Hogwarts has just noticed him noticing it. The vision does not fade so much as close, like a door gently but firmly shut. In the cupboard's returning dark, his heart hammers against his ribs in perfect synchrony with the echo of those distant stones. He understands, with the cold clarity that has always set him apart, that these are not hallucinations to be outgrown. They are a relationship. The boy in the cupboard is no longer only the Dursleys' unwanted burden. He is a weapon being polished in the dark, the living eyes of a fortress that has finally decided to look back. And Hogwarts, having chosen its witness, is almost ready to collect him. The letter, the scar, and the first true vision, Hogwarts does not knock politely on Privet Drive's door. In this timeline, it lays siege. The world will later imagine a comedic barrage of letters, a whimsical postal malfunction. They are wrong. Each envelope that slaps against the brass slot, each parchment that slides beneath the door, arrives with a secondary impact only Harry can see. Ghostly script flaring across the wallpaper, burning through paint and plaster in a phosphorescent hand. Hogwarts, over and over. Not ink, but intention, searing its name into his reality with methodical certainty. To Petunia and Vernon, the hallway remains aggressively ordinary, a fortress of beige. To Harry it becomes a palimpsest of demands, curling letters in archaic Latin, floor plans sketched in light, half-seen staircases that do not exist in any human house. The Dursleys' stamp on envelopes, the walls answer with new lines of script, crawling closer to the cupboard, tightening like a noose of words. In the silence between shouted orders, he hears it, stone whispering, distant bells, a crowd's murmur echoing down corridors he has never walked and yet has always known. When the flight to the hut on the rock comes, it is not an escape, it is escalation. The sea claws at the foundations, wind howls through broken glass. Harry lies awake on the floor, watching the dark, when the first boom of Hagrid's fist hits the door. His scar detonates. The rotting boards, the damp mattress, Dudley's wheeze, everything dissolves into layered realities. Above him towers the great hall, candles suspended in an unseen lattice of golden lines. To his left, the forbidden forest rears up, every tree threaded with faint runes, a living ward line circling the distant castle. Over all of it, like a spider web spun from molten sunlight, he sees Hogwarts protections converging, strand after strand, anchoring not to the grounds, but to his chest. Soul resonance is no metaphor here. It is architecture. The door cracks inward, and with it, the vision shudders. Hagrid fills the frame, rain slick and enormous, a disruption so physical it briefly outshines the metaphysical. Yet when he speaks, the words do not merely travel through air, they strike the web. The sentence is a key turning in an ancient lock. The overlapping images snap into alignment. The corridors he has glimpsed in fever dreams reveal themselves as precise, navigable spaces. The whispers resolve into layered conversations. Centuries of students, professors, ghosts, all imprinted in stone. He is not mad, he is tuned. Then Hagrid names the other presence, Voldemort. For a heartbeat, the golden web freezes, and Harry's perception tilts. The castle's warmth drains. Angles sharpen. The great hall becomes a chessboard viewed from a high, cold vantage. He sees, not as the boy in the cupboard, but as Tom Riddle once did, passageways as vectors, secrets as leverage, children as pieces in a quiet war. The Horcrux in his scar does not merely feed, it receives. An antenna, not just a parasite. Pattern interrupt. The wonder curdles. Hagrid presses the Hogwarts letter into his hand. The familiar emerald ink wavers. Then, under Harry's gaze, it bleeds, letters unspooling beyond the margins in a script only he can perceive. We have been waiting, not the ministry, not the staff, the castle. And as the sea hammers the rock and Hagrid speaks of term dates and trains, Harry understands that what calls him is not an institution offering education, but a living fortress reclaiming its chosen witness and its tactically lethal instrument. A castle in layers, defining Harry's forbidden sight. Hogwarts does not grant him a gift. It imposes a discipline. What begins as a whisper on the lake becomes, by the time he crosses the threshold, a structured, layered way of seeing that no wand can teach and no textbook can sanitize. The first layer is the lie everyone agrees to believe. Stone and torchlight, portraits and staircases. The familiar Gothic silhouette the wizarding world clings to as proof that their fortress is timeless and safe. Harry sees this surface clearly enough, moves through it with the same schedules and timetables as the other students. But in this timeline, that visible castle is merely the thinnest skin over a deeper architecture of war. Beneath it, pressed into every wall and flagstone, is the memory layer. When Harry looks too long at a corridor, the air ripples. Past events replay in translucent fragments, like old film projected against the present. A younger McGonagall striding past, robes sharper, eyes harder. A procession of auras during the First War. Children in uniforms a century out of date, vanishing into a door that no longer exists. This is what he will later name stone reading, the ability to interrogate the castle's own recollection, to track patterns of use, fear, and blood through time with methodical certainty. Interwoven with both is the ward layer, the most alien and the most intimate. Runes crawl along archways in serpentine chains, lines of power thread through ceilings and floors. Pulses move like a second heartbeat under the castle's own silence. Some of those lines hiss, they coil and uncoil, with a syntax that is not human, but when Harry lets Parseltongue slip past his teeth, the ward serpents answer. He does not merely see the protections, he converses with them, bargaining for access, coaxing open pathways that have been dormant since founders walked these halls. This perception is not omnipotent, it is territorial. Within Hogwarts grounds, the three layers blaze with almost painful clarity. The castle is a living map only he can read. In Hogsmeade, the effect thins to ghost veins of warding and scattered memory echoes clinging to the oldest stones. Beyond that, in the Muggle world, the sight dwindles to a faint pressure behind his eyes, a reminder that power exists elsewhere but does not belong to him. Emotional intensity sharpens it. Danger makes the layers snap into brutal focus. Proximity to artifacts, the stone, the diary, the diadem he has not yet found, turns everything incandescent, soul resonance amplifying every line and stain until he has to look away. Without control, this would break him. Occlumency, hammered into him in alpine winters as a different kind of survival, becomes the only reason he is not driven mad by constant overlay. Where other students learn to organize homework, Harry learns to file corridors, to shutter the memory layer during lessons, to narrow his attention to a single ward line when he needs to sleep. His mind becomes a fortress built to house a fortress. From this, unconscious disciplines emerge: line walking, following ward paths that twist behind the visible architecture, letting them guide him to rooms that do not appear on any marauder's map. Stone reading, assembling the flicker of past footsteps into routes, escape vectors, ambush sites, and later, darker still, stain sight, the ability to see Horcrux corruption as oily shadows clinging to objects and spaces, a contamination that rides against the ward layer, like infection in living tissue. It is power. Academically, it makes him terrifyingly competent. He is never lost, rarely surprised, always aware of who has walked where and when. Strategically, he becomes a weapon, being polished in the dark, the Slytherin timeline's answer to the question of how a school becomes an army. But it is also a curse. No one else can corroborate the flickering ghosts he sees, the hissing lines he hears. Even at rest, the castle mutters around him. There is no true night, only dimmer layers. They will say later that Hogwarts was his home. They are wrong. It is his theatre of operations and his watching, waking prison. First year rewritten, the stone, the trials, and Dumbledore's maze. The first months of his first year look, from the outside, almost canon. Children gawking at floating candles, portraits muttering, staircases swinging with theatrical whimsy. In this timeline, that surface spectacle is camouflage, while the other first years shriek when a staircase lurches. Harry is watching the ward lines. They do not simply move, they reroute. Each shift drags pale veins of magic with it, corridors brightening or dimming in his vision, as if the castle is redirecting blood flow. Some stairs refuse to settle near certain passages, tugged away at the last instant, steering traffic around invisible scars. He notices that no route, however convoluted, ever deposits a student within 3 turns of the 3rd floor corridor. The castle is not eccentric. It is enforcing a quarantine. The troll on Halloween exposes the lie of Hogwarts as a bumbling, lovable fortress. As chaos erupts, Harry sees the present layered over with older panics, translucent trolls rampaging through ghostly students from other decades, ward lines flaring a violent red along the main arteries of the castle, sealing doors before teachers even reach them. The 3rd floor corridor burns brightest, a column of warning sigils pulsing like an exposed nerve. Above Fluffy's trap door, in the memory layer, hangs a tight, throbbing knot of magic, a compressed star of intent that screams of concealment, of authority, of wartime design. This is not a school prank gone wrong. It is a live experiment being stress-tested. So when he, Ron, and Hermione finally descend in pursuit of the stone, Harry is not guessing his way through a children's adventure. He is walking a gauntlet he can see. Devil's Snare is already visible from the threshold, not as vines, but as a suspended, luminous net in the underlayer, threads tightening in slow, hungry anticipation. He steps into its reach with methodical certainty, angling his limbs through the gaps his sight reveals, directing Hermione where to burn and where to leave untouched, so the spell collapses instead of panicking. The key room is worse. Hundreds of flying keys are merely the surface. Beneath them, he perceives a dense swarm of light, each key tethered to a detection charm that would have screamed his presence up the ward lines. He chooses the correct key, not by its damaged wing, but by the way its tether feeds back into a different channel, upward toward the headmaster's office. The chessboard is a graveyard. Every square holds a war echo, flickers of past matches where pieces shattered, and, once, where a small spectral body fell and did not rise. Children have bled here before. They are wrong to call this protection. It is conditioning. The Mirror of Erised is the real revelation. The wards around it are not defensive at all. They are observational, fine filaments running like spider silk from the mirror's frame into the ceiling, then racing away through the castle's nervous system to a single locus, Dumbledore's tower. As he confronts Quirrell and the parasitic shadow of Voldemort, Harry feels another gaze layered atop the Dark Lord's, cool, measuring, academic, a masterpiece to be moulded under glass. After the hospital wing, the illusion of safety dies. The candles are dim, the ward is quiet, but when Harry stares at the ceiling, he sees a new line of magic that was not there before. A fresh, bright cord running from his bed, straight up into the night. It threads itself into the same distant cluster he traced above the mirror. Hogwarts itself has been instructed to track him now. Every movement, every surge of soul resonance, every dream. He understands, with a clarity that is tactically lethal, that he is no longer merely using the castle as his map. He is the Slytherin timeline's surveillance asset, and somewhere above, in the dark, someone is already planning the next maze. The Basilisk's Trail, second year as a hunt through living stone. The castle watches him. Second year proves it. When Mrs. Norris is found, Dangling in torchlight beneath the jagged scrawl of blood, the rest of the world sees a prank gone feral, a corridor frozen in horrified silence. Harry sees impact. Along the stone, where the wall meets the floor, a slick, dark trail has burned itself into the memory layer. A serpentine bruise of presence, as if something vast and hateful has been dragged through the soul resonance of the corridor itself. They are wrong. This is not a mystery. It is evidence. In this timeline, the writing on the wall is almost incidental. The real message is the stain only he can see. It coils around corners, threads along banisters, and occasionally lifts like a spectral spine up vertical surfaces where no physical body should have been able to travel. Filch Dumbledore measures. Harry walks the length of that invisible trail with the calm of a weapon being polished in the dark, memorizing every twist, every depth of discoloration, cataloguing how the basilisk's passage has abraded Hogwarts' own memory. Obsession is a methodical certainty. Nights become cartography. While Gryffindor sleeps, he moves through corridors lit only by banked torches and the faint oil-slick shimmer of those basilisk paths. He watches them dive into walls and vanish beneath flagged floors, then reappear 3 corridors away, emerging from grates, sinks, and decorative serpent motifs no one else has ever found threatening. In his mind, a second Hogwarts is being drawn, a subterranean fortress of pipes, sluices, and forgotten chambers, a masterpiece to be moulded into something tactically lethal. At the entrance to the chamber, the divergence becomes undeniable. Myrtle's bathroom is merely damp porcelain to Ron, mildew and myth to Lockhart. To Harry, the central sink is wrapped in a wreath of ancient Slytherin runes, glowing faintly in the ward layer like embers beneath ash. When he hisses in Parseltongue, the stone grinds open, but what matters is what recoils. He watches the castle's defensive lattice twitch away from the command, as if an old, hateful protocol has been forcibly reactivated over Hogwarts' own objections. Authority, in that moment, belongs not to Dumbledore, but to a dead founder speaking through a living Horcrux. Inside, the chamber is a cathedral of stone and repetition. Ron and Lockhart see damp rock, stagnant water, the theatrical grotesquerie of Salazar's statue. Harry sees centuries of Slytherin students entering in ghostly loops, their visits replaying along the walls like translucent film. Boys with ringed hands, girls with cold eyes, each leaving a faint residue of fear and awe. Layered over them, thicker and darker than anything he has yet witnessed, are the basilisk's own movements, etched into the rock like scars. He tracks those scars, notes where they double back, where they linger in overhead arches, where they curl behind pillars. So when the basilisk emerges, he is not surprised. He is already stepping sideways, already calling directions with an eerie, preemptive accuracy that Ron cannot explain. The Slytherin timeline has given him a hunter's sight inside a predator's lair. The pattern should end with the diary. When the fang pierces paper and Riddle screams, the basilisk stains begin to fade, their darkness leaching out of the memory layer like ink in water. The castle exhales, but the silence does not return. Around Ginny Weasley, a new shadow gathers, not a trail, but a halo, a subtle distortion where her outline meets the castle's perception, as though Hogwarts is still trying to decide whether she is guest or conduit. No one else sees it. No one else feels the wrongness of that resonance. Harry does, and he understands with a slow clinical dread that being a vessel has rewritten her connection to the school, that the war for Hogwarts' secrets has marked another claimant. The castle is no longer watching only him. Off-screen catastrophes, how a seeing Harry warps the timeline. From that moment, the timeline itself begins to warp around Harry's perception. The castle has chosen 2 vessels, but only one pair of eyes is fully open, and Hogwarts adjusts with a slow, merciless intelligence that no one else even suspects. In 1991, this site turns the Philosopher's Stone from a guarded secret into a visible wound. Harry does not stumble blindly into the 3rd-floor corridor. He walks there with methodical certainty, tracing the stone's protections as glowing strata of intent layered into the stone. Fluffy's enchantments flicker as a net of compulsion, the devil's snare as a living algorithm of constriction, the chessboard as a ritualized war simulation. By November, he has mapped them. Quirrell feels that pressure. The castle's wards keep flexing back toward a single first-year boy, and in this timeline, Voldemort interprets that as interference. He pushes Quirrell to act earlier, more violently, before Dumbledore can recalibrate. The attempted theft comes in midwinter, not June, and it is not a puzzle-solving adventure. It is a night of screams in the dark, when Quirrell drives a troll, bewitched suits of armor, and a wave of cursed fire through the corridors to reach the mirror. There are bodies this time. Hogwarts learns the taste of blood again. The 1992 chamber crisis is quieter in its casualties, but colder in its implications. Harry can see the basilisk's movements as serpentine fractures sliding through the plumbing and walls, a spectral echo of Parseltongue carved into stone. He begins to chart its routes, predicting where the next attack should occur, steering students away from certain corridors, lingering just long enough near others that the monster never quite arrives. Fewer students are petrified. Filch's cat is saved. Colin Creevey lives to be merely terrified, not frozen, but competence has its own gravity. Teachers notice that Harry is always near the almost victims and never among them. Whispers start that he knows where the monster will strike, that the boy who lived is somehow in dialogue with the terror beneath their feet. The social fortress of Hogwarts shifts around him. Hufflepuffs avoid his gaze. Slytherins watch him like a rival heir. And even Dumbledore's kindness acquires an edge of investigative curiosity. By 1993, the Marauder's map is not a charming relic, it is a primitive console. Harry's stone reading allows him to see the map's ink as merely the surface interface of deeper tracking magic humming through the castle's bones. He realizes, faster and more completely than its creators ever did, that the parchment is leaching from a pre-existing surveillance lattice embedded in Hogwarts itself. In this revelation, the Slytherin timeline tightens. The castle is not just alive, it is already watching everyone. Always. And the map is an unauthorized window into that omniscience. Harry stops treating it as a prank and begins treating it as a prototype, a weapon being polished in the dark. Then 1994 detonates. The Triwizard Maze for Harry is not a hedge labyrinth, but a living organism of layered wards, each enchantment a vein pulsing with intent. He walks into it, feeling not fear, but an almost clinical soul resonance with the magic around him, as though the maze recognizes him as partial administrator. When the cup is planted, its portkey corruption appears to him as a bruise of foreign magic, a sickly halo of graveyard coordinates bleeding over the surrounding lines. He tries to avoid it. The hedges themselves shift. Ward lines converge like fingers closing around his spine, subtly reorienting paths, nudging him, then driving him toward the cup. It feels, in that final second, like Hogwarts itself is pushing him into Voldemort's waiting circle, sacrificing a favored eye to understand the enemy's hand. Year by year, his sight closes certain doors and forces open darker ones. The troll rampage that should have been a childish legend becomes an early massacre. The chamber that should have broken the school becomes instead a social trial that isolates him. The map that should have been mischief becomes a blueprint for institutional surveillance. The tournament that should have crowned a champion becomes an experiment in how far the castle will go to preserve its own strategic advantage. The war does not vanish. It arrives with greater precision. Each September, Hogwarts is less a school and more a testing ground. Its walls a living archive of choices Harry has made and corridors he has redirected. Eventually, the line between classroom and battlefield is not blurred, it is erased. And when open war finally comes, no one realizes that the first campaign was fought silently in the stone itself. The Headmaster and his weapon. Dumbledore learns the truth. By the end of Harry's first year, Hogwarts is no longer merely misbehaving around him. It is aligning. The staff write it off as coincidence, the inevitable chaos of a resurrected Dark Lord brushing against a famous name. They are wrong. Albus Dumbledore does not rely on gossip. He relies on memory. In this timeline, the summer after the Philosopher's Stone, he drains silver threads into the pensieve, McGonagall's clipped reports, Snape's venomous observations, Filch's complaints about locked doors found mysteriously ajar. Viewed alone, they are noise. Viewed together, a pattern emerges with methodical certainty. Harry appears at danger sites too quickly, reaches the third-floor corridor through routes even the twins do not map, skirts cursed suits of armor. Without ever being warned, he moves through the fortress as if following instructions no one else can hear. The Headmaster tests the hypothesis as he tests all weapons, quietly, in controlled conditions. Before Harry's second year, Dumbledore has the elves' brick over one secret passage and quietly reopen another, then folds a new lattice of alarms into the wards around the forbidden corridor. Staircases are allowed to settle in unfamiliar resting places. Portraits are given alternate passwords. A tapestry concealing a side entrance to the library is shifted 3 feet to the left. None of this is announced. None of it should be knowable. Harry adapts in days. His routes change with tactically lethal efficiency, cutting new diagonals through the castle, as if he can see the veins of magic pulsing behind the stone. Where the old passage is gone, he does not even test the wall. He simply never approaches it, as though the absence itself glows. Where the new wards hum, he gives them a contemptuous berth, tracing the exact perimeter of their reach with the precision of a curse breaker twice his age. Dumbledore watches from the pensieve and from the shadows of the upper galleries. This is no childish luck. This is soul resonance with the castle itself. Their private conversations shift accordingly. Tea in the headmaster's office becomes an interrogation disguised as pastoral concern. Dumbledore asks about feelings in certain corridors, hunches near the 3rd floor, whether Harry ever dreams of rooms he has not yet visited. On the surface, it is academic curiosity. Is this a new branch of seer magic, an echo of Parseltongue, a side effect of being a Horcrux? Beneath, it is an arms assessment, a masterpiece to be moulded or contained. Mentorship curdles into intelligence work. Dumbledore begins to steer. A casual remark about disused classrooms near the Charms corridor. A warning to avoid a specific tower for now. A strategically timed errand past the room of requirement long before canon would have revealed it. Harry, as the living eyes of Hogwarts, becomes an unwitting auditor of the castle's secrets, his paths and hesitations telling Dumbledore where the ancient wards have shifted, where Riddle's influence presses against the stone. One night, however, the balance breaks. Harry stands in the office, framed by whirring instruments and phoenix fire, while Dumbledore studies him with the patience of a general measuring a weapon being polished in the dark. He asks another gentle question about corridors. Harry does not answer. Instead, he looks past the headmaster into the wall behind the bookshelves and calmly describes a hidden chamber sunk deep beneath the foundations, lined with magic older than the Founders, sealed with Dumbledore's own blood. A room the headmaster has never mentioned to any living soul. For the first time in the Slytherin timeline, Albus Dumbledore realizes that Hogwarts has chosen its confidant. And it is not him. Students, ghosts, and a living legend. Social fallout of a seer. From that moment, the rumor does not evolve. It detonates. By breakfast the next morning, Harry is no longer just the boy who lived. In this timeline, he is the boy who knows. First, he is the student who just happens to be at the center of every crisis. Troll, stone, basilisk, dementors. Then, with methodical certainty, the narrative mutates. He is the one who can find anything. Lost Neasels reappear in disused classrooms. Contraband fire whiskey vanishes from under floorboards before Filch arrives. And 2 Ravenclaws, conducting an illicit rendezvous behind a tapestry, are intercepted by a prefect Harry warned by instinct. They are wrong. Harry is not guessing. The castle is speaking, and he is its chosen frequency. Whispers about soul resonance spread in low, frightened tones. Some say the wards themselves bent around the killing curse and left a permanent echo in him, a weapon being polished in the dark, not by Bellatrix, but by Hogwarts' fortress. The staff react with the strained composure of generals realizing the battlefield has grown eyes. McGonagall is unsettled, yet pragmatic. She tests the phenomenon by quietly asking Harry to locate a cursed music box gone missing from the staff room. He closes his eyes, names a specific alcove 3 floors down, and when she retrieves it, exactly where he said, her expression hardens into acceptance. From then on, she feeds him hypotheticals that always end with dangerous artifacts being removed before they can ignite a war inside the walls. Snape, by contrast, assumes corruption, dark magic, legilimency, some clandestine device. He layers his classroom in obfuscation charms, brews potions whose fumes are designed to scramble perception, and watches Harry navigate them with unnerving ease, stepping around invisible ward lines as though they are painted on the flagstones. Each successful test does not reassure him. It deepens his conviction that whatever lives in Harry's perception is older and less loyal than any house. Trelawney responds with theatrical hysteria. On alternating days, she calls him a rival seer usurping her domain, or a cursed vessel through whom the castle is bleeding its final prophecies. In a dry irony, her most accurate prediction is the one students laugh at the most: that Harry's sight will leave him terribly, magnificently alone. The student body fragments into cults of interpretation. Slytherins approach him with transactional clarity, offering favors and protection in exchange for maps of secret passageways, staff patrol routes, and hidden rendezvous points. Some Hufflepuffs, less cynical but no less strategic, trail him like a walking marauder's map, asking, half in awe, half in hope, whether a particular staircase is likely to shift before curfew. Then the pattern interrupt arrives. A fringe of first and second years begin calling him the Eyes of Hogwarts. At first, it is a joke, a whispered title traded in corridors. Then they start asking him to bless their exam routes, to walk their path from dormitory to classroom, and quietly note any corridor that feels wrong. He obliges once, almost absent-mindedly, and when that group sails through the week without a single run-in with Filch or Peeves, the superstition calcifies into ritual. The ghosts, paradoxically, are his only honest mirror. Nearly headless Nick realizes Harry can see residual dueling scars etched into stone that even centuries of spectral drifting have blurred for him. The Grey Lady watches Harry pause before a window and flinch at an execution that happened there 500 years ago, reading the past in the glass like a text. The Bloody Baron, whose silence is an authority of its own, breaks it only to warn Harry that no one who sees as much as the castle does stays sane or loyal forever. And beneath all of this spectacle runs the private cost. Even Ron and Hermione, loyal to the point of self-endangerment, cannot inhabit his reality. There are corridors Harry walks alone because explaining why he avoids a sunlit archway, because he can see a future duel there, or a memory of a murder, would only widen the gap. Heroism, in the Slytherin timeline, becomes a solitary act, not just facing monsters, but enduring the knowledge of where they will one day stand. Voldemort upgraded when the Dark Lord steals the castle's eyes. Heroism isolates Harry. Revelation isolates Voldemort. In this timeline, the Dark Lord is the second mind forced to inhabit Harry's haunted corridors, and that is the true escalation of the war. The first suspicion is almost accidental. The diary, already a proto-Horcrux, and now a conduit for a living riddle, does more than speak with Ginny. It listens. When Harry later confronts the resurrected riddle echo beneath the school, their shared Horcrux resonance distorts the connection. For a heartbeat, Tom does not see the chamber. He sees what Harry sees when he looks at stone: threads of ward light, stains of old parcel-tongue bargains. the faint, oily smear where a basilisk's spirit once coiled around Salazar's wards. It is a misalignment of perspective, a glitch in soul resonance that should not exist. They are wrong, those who imagine Voldemort as merely anger and arrogance. He is also a scholar of forbidden architectures. That single flicker of alien perception is catalogued, dissected, stored. Years later, when the mental link between Harry and Voldemort ignites fully, after the graveyard, after blood and rebirth, those glitches return. During a shared vision of Hogwarts' corridors, Voldemort glimpses not just students fleeing, but translucent overlays. Memory echoes of duels long past, spectral outlines of secret doors, sliding in and out of phase, Horcrux stains pulsing like bruises beneath the flagstones. By the third incident, he stops dismissing it as noise. Harry Potter is not merely sensitive. Harry Potter is seeing the castle. From that realization, Voldemort's research becomes a war plan. He had already treated Hogwarts as a symbolic prize. Now he recognizes it as a semi-sentient fortress whose gaze has been weaponized. In the Slytherin timeline, he turns back to the sources that first shaped him. The Chamber of Secrets is reopened, not as spectacle, but as laboratory. He walks its length, tracing the serpentine carvings, muttering Parseltongue formulae that interrogate the stone itself, hunting for the protocol by which Hogwarts chooses a seer. The Room of Requirement becomes his second site of experimentation, a mirror to Harry's reluctant communion. Where the castle offers Harry sanctuary and archives, it offers Voldemort resistance. The room flickers, misbehaves, produces half-formed altars and broken ritual circles, as though the building understands that a masterpiece to be molded has already been claimed. That resistance only confirms his hypothesis. There is a contract here, a binding. So he theorizes the unthinkable. If the castle has invested its perception in one boy, then that channel can be hijacked or replicated. Voldemort begins to sketch a fusion, a darker counterpart to Harry's sight. If Harry is a weapon being polished in the dark by the castle's unconscious will, then Voldemort will become the hand that grips the hilt. He studies ley line charts, overlays them with the known locations of his Horcruxes, and arrives at a brutal conclusion. By rebinding his soul fragments directly into Hogwarts ley junctions, he might create his own dark eyes, a parasitic consciousness riding the castle's awareness. There are two routes: corrupt the existing conduit, break Harry, twist his connection until Hogwarts' gaze is dragged towards the Dark Lord, or forge a parallel channel through sacrificial magic, feeding the castle a river of death until it cannot ignore him. With methodical certainty, he prepares for both. This changes the tempo of the war. Aware that Harry's perceptions make the school tactically lethal as an intelligence hub, Voldemort refuses to allow another year of quiet consolidation. Attacks come earlier, sharper, focused not just on people, but on infrastructure. The Hogsmeade access tunnels, the Owlery's aerial ward nodes, the tiny alpine relay shrines that tie Hogwarts' protections into the wider magical world. Each strike is aimed at blinding a facet of the fortress. By the time the Order understands, the objective has shifted. Voldemort no longer seeks merely to kill the boy who lived. He seeks to blind Hogwarts itself, or worse, to turn its gaze. The oldest magic in Britain is being courted by a monster who intends that, when the war reaches its final pitch, the castle will watch the world through his eyes. And, if a living fortress ever chooses the Dark Lord as its witness, then every stone becomes a spy, every corridor a noose, and the battlefield expands to include the walls themselves. The room that looked back, Marauder's Map, Room of Requirement, and beyond. The Marauder's Map is usually treated as a prankster's relic, a clever toy from a less disciplined era of the war. They are wrong. In this timeline, the first time Harry whispers, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," the parchment does not simply bloom with ink. It answers him with a low, thrumming resonance that hums along his bones, as if the castle itself is exhaling through the page. To everyone else, the map is miraculous because it shows names. To Harry, raised as a weapon, being polished in the dark, it is almost primitive. What spreads before him is a flattened, anemic approximation of what his altered sight already perceives in 3 dimensions. Wards like arteries, staircases like shifting vertebrae, human presences as moving knots of pressure and intention. The inked corridors are a children's sketch overlaid on a living fortress. The marvel is not that the map reveals Hogwarts, but that it dares to pretend this is all there is. He tests that arrogance. With methodical certainty, he lets his gaze slip past the surface of the parchment, not reading the lines but listening for the soul resonance beneath them. The result is immediate and disquieting. Faint grey outlines appear where no ink lies, a narrow stair curling down below the dungeons into long sealed chambers, a cluster of windowless vaults behind the library, the spectral echo of a dueling hall that no longer exists in stone but still repeats its patterns in magic. At the edges, he sees the ghostly paths of people long dead, faded tracks of motion, like afterimages burned into the castle's memory. The map, he realizes, is limited not by Hogwarts, but by 4 talented boys who never thought to ask the castle harder questions. The Room of Requirement is the answer to one of those questions. Long before Dumbledore's army, Harry notices an anomaly, a blind spot in the ward layer, a place on the 7th floor where lines of power converge and then twist away, like an eye closing whenever he looks directly at it. When he walks past 3 times, with deliberate intent, he does not see a door appear. He sees the absence open, the closed eye snap wide, and only then does the wood and handle coalesce for everyone else. Inside, the silence is different. This is not an empty room. It is Hogwarts concentrating. Shelves, cushions, training dummies. These are props. What presses against Harry's skin is the focused will of the castle, a conscious node folding and refolding itself around his need, testing the boundaries of his authority. In the Slytherin timeline, the room is not a convenience. It is a negotiation. By the time of the Horcrux hunt, that negotiation becomes war. Harry has learned to see contamination as stain sight, oil-dark bruises in the fabric of the wards, where Voldemort's fragments cling and burrow. The room, responsive to need, tries to obey 2 masters at once: Harry's ruthless desire to cleanse the fortress and Voldemort's equally ruthless desire to disappear inside it. The result is the Fiendfire maze made literal. Shifting piles, vanishing doors, protections that reconfigure mid-step, as if the castle is convulsing between predator and host. The pattern breaks one night when there is no hunt, no witnesses, no immediate threat. Harry stands alone in the room, surrounded by nothing but bare stone, no furniture, no distraction, and asks, very quietly, who is actually in control? Him or Hogwarts? For a heartbeat, nothing moves. Then the walls flicker and 4 translucent figures resolve out of the stone itself, the founders, watching him with the calm appraisal reserved for a masterpiece to be molded. In this timeline, the revelation is simple and devastating. His sight is not an accident of Scar and Horcrux. It is an inheritance, engineered long before Voldemort, from a castle that has finally chosen its eyes. And eyes, once opened, do not close without a price. Eyes of the Order, political deals, and weaponized sight. The price arrives as negotiation. Within days, Hogwarts itself provides the stage. The room of requirement shudders away from cozy cushions and hidden contraband, crystallizing instead into a bare stone council chamber, a deliberate echo of Wizengamot austerity without its velvet pretensions. In this timeline, Harry is summoned there not as a student, but as an asset. Dumbledore, McGonagall, and a thin, carefully curated slice of the Order sit opposite him at a long, unadorned table. No house banners, no tea, only authority, stripped to its bones. The reframe is brutal in its simplicity. For years, the wizarding world has treated Hogwarts as an impregnable fortress, a background constant in the war. They are wrong. The boy seated across from them can see hairline fractures in that illusion, staircases that sometimes refuse auras, a tapestry that conceals not just a passage, but a memory of blood, a corridor where the air itself hums with Horcrux residue, like a low, sick soul resonance. The adults have finally understood that the castle's secrets are no longer abstract mysteries, they are actionable intelligence. Dumbledore presents the proposal like a treaty. In exchange for Harry systematically walking the castle, cataloguing every moving wall, every sentient ward, every cursed artifact that flickers at the edge of his vision, the Order will formalize what he has been taking by force of personality. Autonomy, private instruction in occlumency, not as a belated patch, but as an art, structured training in wardcraft, so that the boy who sees the seams of Hogwarts can also stitch new protections into its skin. A guaranteed voice in how the school is defended when the next assault comes. His sight treated as a strategic resource rather than a teenage anomaly. It is, on paper, generous. It is also a contract that assumes he will serve. The pattern interrupt arrives from London. Word of a castle seer reaches the ministry with methodical certainty, carried by gossip, intercepted owls, and one terrified parent who watched Harry stare at a blank wall and calmly describe the duel that had once killed a man there. Fudge, if he still clings to office, or Scrimgeour, if war has already burned away the pretense, demands access, registration, oversight. A student who can unmask every hidden ingress into Britain's primary magical fortress is, by definition, a national asset, possibly even conscription material. No single boy, they argue, should control the map of the last safe stronghold in the Slytherin timeline. A weapon being polished in the dark must be held by the state, or broken. The inversion is quiet but total. Harry, who has been a pawn on every board since Godric's Hollow, recognizes that for certain corridors, certain stains, certain chambers, there is no substitute. Without his cooperation, Dumbledore cannot reliably trace a Horcrux's echo through stone. The Ministry cannot secure the Forgotten Servant's passage that opens directly under the Great Hall. Even Voldemort, for all his power, cannot see the way the wards flex when a lie is told on school grounds. For the first time, Harry can set terms. He does. Protections for students, codified, not requested. Limits on how his reports can be used. No preemptive purges. No weaponizing of secrets against children. No ministry access without his explicit consent. Occlumency training, yes, but on his schedule with his choice of secondary instructor. He signs nothing, but the room feels the weight of an unwritten treaty. Then Dumbledore asks for one more revelation. There is, the Headmaster has sensed, a deeply buried chamber beneath the foundations, older than the Founder's public architecture, where Harry's gaze keeps snagging and sliding away like light off oil. He requests its location, softly, as if asking for a confession. Harry refuses. No anger, no explanation, just a controlled, absolute no, and a flicker in his eyes that tells the room itself to hold its tongue. One secret, he decides, will remain his alone for now. And in a war defined by information, that withheld chamber will matter more than any of them yet understand. War inside the walls. 5th and 6th year as a siege of secrets. That withheld chamber becomes the pivot on which the next 2 years turn, because by 5th year, Hogwarts itself is no longer a school in any meaningful sense. It is a contested fortress, and Harry's sight is the highest piece on the board. Umbridge does not arrive alone in this timeline. She comes draped in ministry parchment and ringed with imported magic. Her first act is not a decree, but an incantation. Fat, pink sigils unrolling across the stone like sugared mold. Ministry-approved surveillance webs trying to overlay the castle's native wards. Harry watches the clash in real time. Hogwarts's older, sterner lines recoil, then grind against the intruders, oil and water trapped in the same vein of stone. The walls hum with offended authority, and for the first time, he sees the castle angry. The world believes Umbridge wins that year through quills and detentions. They are wrong. Her real victory is almost invisible. Every corridor she inspects is quietly overwritten, every classroom repainted in that cloying saccharine magic that eats at the edges of older protections. To everyone else, the castle simply feels tighter. To Harry, it looks diseased. He can trace her progress like rot, a spreading pink corrosion that tries to blind Hogwarts' own eyes. Dumbledore's army, therefore, is not just a student rebellion. It is counter-warding, guided by a weapon being polished in the dark. The room of requirement becomes less a single chamber and more a moving organ in the castle's body. Harry learns to speak to it in ward lines and intent, carving temporary arteries through the school, corridors that forget footsteps, staircases whose portraits briefly lose interest, pockets of space where Umbridge's imported spells slide off as if repelled by some deeper soul resonance. In this timeline, every meeting of the DA is also a field test of Harry's evolving command over Hogwarts' memory. By 6th year, the war outside has seeped fully inside. Snape takes the defense post, and with him, quietly, methodical certainty, come new signatures. Harry's perception, already sharpened to a tactically lethal edge, registers them before any teacher does. Thin, greasy stains at the boundary stones, smears of dark resonance clinging to the underside of bridges, the faint outline of an illicit passage thickening like a bruise. Death Eaters do not simply infiltrate. Their presence writes itself into the castle's bones, and Harry becomes a living radar, tracking incursions no map could show. The cost is cumulative. Every jewel in the corridors leaves an echo. Every hex in a bathroom imprints a brief, shrieking afterimage into the walls. As the castle is used as a battleground, Harry's inner world turns cacophonous. Centuries of punishment rooms, forgotten dungeons, and execution chambers overlap with fresh violence. Silence becomes impossible. Even sleep is invaded by flickers of ancient detentions and modern cruciatus, layered like palimpsest over the same flagstones. Then the pattern breaks. On a routine patrol, tracing a new smear of dark magic near the Great Hall, Harry's sight stutters. For a heartbeat, the present dissolves, and he sees the hall, not as it is, but as it will be. Banners torn, windows shattered, the floor drowned in bodies and broken wands, the air thick with the metallic haze of too many spells cast too quickly. A battle that has not yet happened burns itself across his vision, then snaps away, leaving him gasping against a perfectly untouched doorway. In the Slytherin timeline, this is the moment the question shifts. Harry is no longer merely the eyes of Hogwarts as it is. He may be glimpsing what Hogwarts will become. And if the castle is beginning to show him the future, the next move in the war will not be decided by prophecy, but by what he chooses to see and what he refuses to warn them about. The final battle, Horcrux stains and a castle on fire. When he returns to Hogwarts for the final time, the castle almost kills him before Voldemort gets the chance. The moment Harry's boots cross the boundary stones, his sight detonates. Wards that once hummed as faint silver threads now roar in full orchestral fury. Every line of protection, every ancient lattice of runes, flares into visibility at once. The entire fortress is a storm of stains and light, a battlefield palimpsest where the siege of 1998, the Founder's Duels, and Grindelwald's shadow campaigns all burn simultaneously across the same stone. In this timeline, the boy who lived does not simply walk back into school, he steps into a sensory airstrike. He staggers not from fear, but from scale. Ward lines hang frayed and sparking like exposed nerves snapping against the night as the Death Eaters press in. Memory echoes bleed through the corridors. Children in medieval robes running from spectral giants, auras dragging stunned bodies. Dumbledore himself casting shields that still shimmer as afterimages in the walls. The castle remembers every war at once, and through the hybrid of Horcrux and soul resonance in Harry's scar, it forces him to remember with it. The Horcrux hunt becomes less a puzzle and more a pursuit. Harry does not guess at Ravenclaw's diadem. He hunts it the way a predator tracks blood in snow. A cold, oily shadow clings to certain staircases, slides along banisters, pools at junctions where young witches once died. He follows that stain through a maze only he can truly see, past rooms that flicker between centuries, until the trail condenses into a black sun in the heart of the room of requirement. Shelves, junk, lost treasures, all of it eclipsed by a single, malignant gravity. He reaches into that darkness with methodical certainty, and when his hand closes on the diadem, the castle shudders like a body touched at an old wound. Then the walls start to scream. As the battle ignites, Harry becomes what Bellatrix always intended him to be, a weapon being polished in the dark, now turned outward. He is no longer just a duelist, he is a living command center. Through stone and smoke, he reads ward shifts the way other generals read maps. A shield net fails on the North Tower. He feels the snap and shouts orders before the first curse hits. A corridor near the kitchens floods with a fresh, greasy stain. Fiend fire primed, but not yet lit, and he reroutes students with a single barked command. To the defenders, his authority feels oracular. To Harry, it is simply data. The Slytherin timeline reveals its full cruelty here. Hogwarts itself begins to panic. Curses tear through its structure, and the once elegant ward web twists into a tangle of flailing limbs. Secret doors slam, not in strategy, but in fear. Portraits flicker between centuries. Memory echoes rupture and spill into the present. Ghostly children sprint through live firefights. Spectral professors overlay their living counterparts. For a moment, Harry feels the building's terror and rage as if it were a living creature screaming directly into his occlumency shields. The fortress that raised him as quietly as the Alpine estate once did is now a wounded animal, thrashing in his mind. And then Voldemort falls. The Horcrux stains evaporate in an instant, ripped out of the stone, like ink drawn into a vacuum. The oily shadows vanish. The black sun in the room of requirement gutters and dies. But something else goes with them. In the echo of the final curse, Harry reaches instinctively for the familiar whisper of shifting wards, the low, constant murmur of Hogwarts' secrets. There is only silence, not peace, not relief. A terrifying, surgical absence, as if a nerve has been severed. The world resolves into ordinary stone and ordinary darkness, and he realizes with clinical horror that when the last fragment of Voldemort's soul disintegrated, it took his second sight, and perhaps the castle's trust, with it. The war is over, they will say. They are wrong. For Harry, the true cost is only beginning to reveal itself. The price of sight, what Harry must lose to win. The silence after the war is not peace, it is absence masquerading as mercy. In the first grey dawn after Voldemort's execution in the courtyard, Harry walks the ruined corridors, expecting the usual palimpsest of wards and whispers, and finds only a thinned-out murmur, a radio station, slipping beyond range. Here, where he once saw the marauders racing in translucent defiance down a staircase, there is only stone. In the shadow of the great hall doors, where the castle once overlaid dueling diagrams and kill zones in lines of cold blue fire, there is only dust motes drifting in ordinary darkness. In this timeline, the loss feels less like a power fading and more like a bereavement, a soul resonance abruptly amputated. He has been a weapon, being polished in the dark. Now the hand that held him has let go. The explanation does not come from the living. It arrives in a pensieve, in a memory seeded by a man who made a habit of preparing for conversations he would not survive. Dumbledore, younger and more intact than Harry remembers from the tower, stands in a spectral king's cross and explains with clinical gentleness that this bond was never meant to be permanent. The Horcrux, lodged in Harry's scar, pressed against Hogwarts' ancient ward matrix by years of proximity and war, created an accidental circuit. The castle, already a fortress with its own half-conscious will, routed more and more of its perception through the one vessel that could speak Parseltongue and touch Voldemort's magic without burning. When the fragment died, Dumbledore says, that bridge began to fail. To keep it now, to force the connection to remain open, would be to anchor Harry here, body and magic braided into stone, until he became less a man than a standing ward, a permanent sentinel. A masterpiece to be moulded by the castle's slow, geological patience. This is the dilemma the wizarding world will never see. They will say he can finally be normal. They are wrong. The choice is not between power and rest. It is between two different forms of captivity. Keep his full sight, and he becomes the undisputed authority of these halls. The living marauder's map, tactically lethal and omnipresent, condemned to watch generations of children walk past the graves he remembers. Let it atrophy, and he steps back into a world rendered suddenly shallow, stripped of the deeper layers that have defined him since childhood. Emotionally, the cost is worse than any curse. His identity has been built around seeing what others cannot. The basilisk's trail beneath the pipes, the room of requirement flexing like a lung in the castle's flank, the dead replaying their last moments in looping, silent protest. To let that go feels like betrayal. Of the students he could still protect, of the war dead whose echoes he has guarded, of the castle itself, which chose him as its witness when no one else was listening. By the time he reaches the Great Hall, the decision has calcified into something sharp. The enchanted ceiling is cracked, showing real sky for once. The house tables are broken, reduced to splinters and ash. Harry crosses the rubble-strewn floor, kneels, and lays his hand flat against the cold flagstone where Voldemort fell. For a heartbeat, something stirs, faint, questioning, like a fortress testing a damaged ward. Harry closes his eyes. He makes his choice in absolute silence. We are not told which way he turns. Not yet. The stone under his palm hums once, either in farewell or in renewed claim, and the Slytherin timeline holds its breath while the boy who lived decides whether to remain its eyes or finally, deliberately, to go blind. Two futures, one castle. If Harry keeps or surrenders the eyes, in one future, the hum never fades. Harry opens his eyes, and the world never quite looks human again. In this timeline, he remains the castle's chosen retina, Hogwarts' living marauder's map, but deeper, crueler, more intimate. As the years pass and wars cool into brittle peace, he does not become minister or international envoy. He becomes something narrower and far more absolute, a quiet authority embedded in stone. He lives in an upper office overlooking the grounds, yet his true vantage point is everywhere the wards can reach. A first year loses her way on the third-floor corridor, turning left where the staircase should have turned right. Before panic can crest, Harry is already moving. He has seen, through the castle's memory, the echo of another child, once running here, small, red-haired, dragging a diary that pulsed with Tom Riddle's soul resonance. He arrives with a lantern and a calm voice, shepherding the girl back, never explaining how he knew. To her, he is a reassuring legend. To the castle, he is a weapon being polished in the dark. Years later, a trunk crosses the boundary, its false bottom wrapped in spells that would have blinded any ordinary Auror. Harry feels it as a bruise in the wards, a discordant resonance like cold iron in warm water. He directs the headmistress to that one unremarkable Hufflepuff dormitory, guides the confiscation of a tactically lethal artifact before its curse can bloom. Officially, she discovered it through routine inspection. Unofficially, policy across the wizarding world is being nudged by a man who sleeps alone above an ancient staircase. The methodical certainty of his interventions saves lives. It also erodes something less measurable. Birthdays are missed. His children, if he allows himself children in this version, learn early that their father hears the walls before he hears them. He becomes a masterpiece to be molded not by Bellatrix or Dumbledore, but by corridors, portraits, and the endless replay of other people's nearly avoided deaths. Safety becomes his only language. Intimacy rusts. Then, interrupting that cold, strategic future, imagine the other choice. Harry opens his eyes, and the hum is gone. The castle recedes into ordinary magic. The wards fall back into polite, inscrutable silence. In this alternate branch of the Slytherin timeline, Hogwarts returns to being a charmingly treacherous school rather than an omniscient fortress. The deeper layers, the bleeding memories of chambers and battlefields, sink like silt to the bottom of a dark lake. A different first year gets lost in the same corridor. No spectral warning flares behind Harry's eyes, because there is nothing left to see. A prefect finds the child 10 minutes later, irritable but harmless, and the incident becomes a story, not a scar. Somewhere else, a smuggled artifact does slip through. It harms, but it does not escalate into war. The world absorbs the blow, learns, legislates, forgets. Harry, in this quieter future, is present in ways that never make the profit. He burns dinner. He attends Quidditch matches as a father, not as a sentient alarm system. At night, when nightmares come, they are his own, not the castle's. Which is kinder, to let a semi-sentient fortress forget some of its pain, or to bind one man to relive it indefinitely in the name of vigilance. They are wrong, those who claim the answer is obvious. A society that waged war through secrets now flirts with the comfort of ignorance. And the question hangs. After Voldemort and Dumbledore, after one who hoarded knowledge and one who rationed it, does Harry perpetuate their philosophies or finally refuse them both? We do not resolve it yet. Instead, we hold both images, a lone figure pacing stone corridors, and the same man laughing, briefly, at a cluttered kitchen table. The choice between them will decide not just Hogwarts' future, but what the wizarding world believes knowledge is for. The secret you choose, closing the castle doors. In this timeline, that choice is the quiet hinge on which everything turns. not wand versus wand, but whether one boy closes his eyes, the wizarding world will write about prophecies and elder wands and battlefield heroics. They are wrong. The real war was always fought in a single perspective, Harry's, and in the way Hogwarts chose to reveal itself to him and no one else. Across 7 years, he is not a lucky protagonist, stumbling through mysteries. He is a solitary witness, walking through a living mind. The stone is never just a puzzle behind a locked door. It is a visible gauntlet, a corridor where enchantments glow like exposed nerves. Each trap a conscious antibody the castle deploys, and that Harry alone can see. The chamber is not discovered. It bleeds through the masonry, the basilisk a moving stain in the walls. Its passage a dark bruise only his altered sight can trace. The Marauder's map and the Room of Requirement cease to be quirky artifacts and become, instead, crude interfaces to a deeper perception. The map is a two-dimensional echo of what Harry's senses already register in 3, a constant, shifting overlay of names, footsteps, intentions. The room is soul resonance-made architecture, Hogwarts folding itself around his need with methodical certainty, testing how far he will go when the building itself offers to become his accomplice. By the final battle, the fortress is fighting as much through him as around him. Every corridor is double exposed, the present charge of bodies, and the ghostly after-images of former wars, students and staff, layered like translucent film. He steps where the stones flare brightest, with remembered victory, drags allies away from flagstones that hum with prior deaths. To everyone else, it is chaos. To Harry, it is a tactically lethal map drawn directly on his retinas. So the question returns to you, stripped of romance. If you were the only one who could see your world's buried truths, its concealed corridors, its institutional lies, its carefully walled-off casualties, what would you do with that sight? Would you expose everything and let the castle burn, weaponize it, becoming a weapon being polished in the dark, or guard it, choosing the mercy of partial blindness for everyone else, and perhaps for yourself? This Eyes of Hogwarts, Harry does not invent new themes. He sharpens what was already there. Memory becomes not nostalgia, but evidence. Surveillance stops being a joke about a mischievous map and becomes an ethical regime. Institutional secrets, horcruxes, cover-ups, the quiet decisions of headmasters are no longer abstractions once one student can see their residue etched into stone. So as we close this thought experiment, choose your scene, the mirror of Erised, reflecting not just family, but the castle's own desire. The Yule Ball, with wards flickering uneasily under foreign banners. Snape's death, witnessed not in a boathouse, but in walls that will never forget. Tell me, in the comments, which moment you believe this site would change the most, and what follow-up you want to walk next. Another character granted partial vision, or a future where Hogwarts, denied Harry, selects a new eye, because the doors of the castle do not close on their own. Someone, somewhere, decides what remains visible and what is forever left in the dark.